will be more definite on Monday the 17th. Today, as you know, is October 13th, Thursday. The state apparently intends to rest on Monday the 17th. Then we will likely be in recess the rest of that week. It is likely you will not be here on the 18th, 19th, or 20th. We have certain witnesses, certain medical professionals who have certain days set that they can only be here for those days. And the cases move more quickly than all parties anticipated. So you will be back here the week of the 24th. It may be that there's a recess on a day or two of that week, and we are not yet certain about that. So on Monday the 17th, which is the last, you'll just be here on Monday, we'll give you a schedule. We'll give you a written schedule that will tell you about the schedule for the rest of the trial. And then the trial will continue that week, either on some days or on all days, through the week of Halloween and through the week of November 7th. At this time, we anticipate that the case will finish on that week of November 7th. However, I asked you to commit through the week of November 14th, and I'm still holding you to that. So I want to be real clear about that. Finally, I just want to tell you, and I'll give you a lot more instructions about this. On the day of October 26th, we are taking a site visit to Seattle Pacific University to Otto Miller Hall. There'll be specific instructions, the main one being you can't speak at all during that time and no one will be allowed to talk. It's simply an opportunity to see the scene and then come back. But I'll give you a lot more instructions about that. That'll be Wednesday, October 26th. And again, we'll tell you about the arrangements for how that works. We will be here. We'll transport you. We'll come back. That's the way that will proceed. You won't be driving there independently. And my instruction about not visiting the scene still applies throughout the entire trial. Don't go to Seattle Pacific University. Don't go to Otto Miller Hall. Avoid that way if you're going through to Ballard or Fremont. Go a different way. So that's our schedule. Again, Monday, I will give you a written schedule, a typewritten schedule about the rest of the trial, what days we're on, what days we're off. The parties have spent a lot of time on scheduling their witnesses in order to use your time most effectively. And it just turned out fortuitously in some ways that we moved more quickly than anticipated. And so instead of coming in for a day, a few hours here, a few hours there, they're arranging the witnesses to use your time most efficiently. All right? All right, we're going to proceed with the state's case.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Detective Hockenstead.
Detective, you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Please be seated.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Can you state your full name and spell it for the court reporter?
Detective Lisa Hockenstead, Lisa. Last name is Haakenstad.
And Detective, who do you work for?
I work for the Seattle Police Department.
How long have you worked for Seattle Police Department?
I've been with them for 22 years now.
And you indicate you're a detective?
I am.
How long have you been a detective?
I became a detective in December of 2001. I worked in our domestic violence unit as a felony case detective. And in June of 2005, I went to our crime scene investigations unit.
And were you patrol before that?
I was.
You're actually the first detective we've heard from in this case. Can you just kind of break down the role of a detective in the Seattle Police Department?
Sure. The detectives work for the Criminal Investigations Bureau, and normally when a patrol will respond to a scene if there's, or to a call, and then one call, if there's a crime that has occurred, they'll write a report, and a lot of times those will get assigned to the various detective units. The detectives will follow up on those leads and present the cases and possibly present charges for court, depending on the case.
So sort of additional investigation is for the detective as opposed to patrol officers?
Yeah, so they may go back out to the scene, they'll possibly interview the victim, a suspect, witnesses, and put together a case.
And then I think you said you were part of the criminal investigations unit, is that correct?
The Criminal Investigations Bureau, yes.
But the CSI is what you do, right?
Yes.
Tell us what that is.
So we're a support unit for all of the other detectives. So when they respond or they have a scene for themselves to investigate, if there's a crime scene, we will go out and process that scene for evidence. And what that means is we will take photographs, we will complete a sketch, we will collect evidence at the scene. If there's a search warrant to process, we can do that for them.
Do you have additional training or expertise to be part of the CSI team, or how does that work?
I do. I came to the unit in 2005 and was initially given training in bloodstain pattern analysis. I went to the FBI Academy for a photography school, and then they sent me to Tennessee to the National Forensic Academy, and that's a 10-week advanced program where you study arson and fire investigations, bomb investigations, use chemical processing to take fingerprinting, photography, digital photography, firearms trajectory, and that kind of.
And then you have experience since then, correct?
I have. I've continued taking classes, and I'm certified with the International Association for IAI. I'm a senior crime scene analyst with them.
You mentioned a team. How many members of the crime scene investigator team are there at Seattle Police Department?
We currently have 7 detectives that are in our unit, and we take turns rotating assignments at a scene. Usually 3 of us will go out to process a scene along with our supervisor, and one person will be designated the primary CSI detective, and that person is responsible for taking notes, photographs, and documenting the scene. And then another person will be assigned to map that scene or do a sketch of the scene. And then another person is there to help with evidence collection or anything else that's needed.
Were you part of the Seattle Police Department team that responded to Seattle Pacific University on June 5th of 2014?
I was.
How many of y'all went out to that one? Let me ask you something, Detective. As part of, what was your role? Do you remember? Were you the lead?
Yeah, I was assigned as the primary detective.
As part of your responsibilities, did you create reports with regard to your part in that investigation?
I did.
Would referring to those reports assist you in your recollection of specific details?
They would.
States 107 and 108 are burnt.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Detective, I'm going to hand you what's remarked for identification of States Exhibit 107. Is that a copy of your report that you created to document your involvement in this investigation?
Yes, it is.
And so just if you can let us know sort of what was this response, how many of you guys went, who was there when you got there?
Okay. So there were 6 of us from the crime scene investigations unit that responded, and that included my supervisor. Do you want the names? Or?
No, just sort of like tell me about who was there when you got there.
Okay.
And there's 6 of you. Who else was at the scene?
Okay. When we got there, we had to park about 3 blocks away because there were so many personnel and fire trucks at the scene. There were numerous personnel from the fire department. We had ATF, FBI, all of the SPD commanders, various detectives units. We had our homicide detectives, the force investigation team detectives, arson bomb. A lot of patrol officers were there, traffic officers were there providing security. And we also had people from the mayor's office that responded, and all the media outlets were also there.
So, what happens with a scene like that in terms of preservation of evidence? How was that when you arrived with all those people there?
They'd actually had the scene on the sidewalk secured with crime scene tape, and everyone was mostly outside of that area, other than people that were involved. And so they have yellow crime scene tape blocking all the streets around the university there, and then they had red crime scene tape that blocked off the actual crime scene.
And what about inside the building there? Were there a lot of folks, sort of, we've seen video of students and professors kind of milling around with officers at the same time. Was that cleared by the time you got in there?
By the time I went inside, it had been cleared out, so it was completely empty, and it was also, there was crime scene tape up in there as well.
So you said there were 6 detectives, and then you talked about sort of the different roles that the crime scene investigators have, starting with, I think, notes and photographs. Tell us just generally, about the photographs taken in this case.
Well, this
what
was a...
Yeah, what your general process is for every scene as well.
Okay. For every scene, we try and take photographs when we first arrive, before we touch anything or go into the scene, other than maybe for a brief walkthrough to see where everything is. So we'll take overall photos of the scene, and then we'll get closer up and take medium photos to show the relationship of evidence to areas that you can pick out. And then we'll take close-up photos of any evidence that we collect.
And that's sort of standard operating procedure.
Yes.
In this case, who took the photos? Do you remember?
I took the photos. I also requested our SPD Photo Lab photographers to come out. It was such a big scene, and with all the buildings on campus, I couldn't focus on the crime scenes themselves as well as the outlying area while all the people were still there. So I asked the Photo Lab to come out and do the bigger overall photos of the area for me.
And am I correct that they took pictures of basically every single classroom in that building?
That's correct.
Including every door that's lodged, breached, and stuff like that?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many photographs were taken?
The photographer from the Photo Lab took a little over 750 photos, and excuse me, I myself took just about 200 at the scene.
There's one.
Yes, absolutely.
States Exhibit 109 is marked.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification of States Exhibit 109. Take a look and let us know if those are the photographs of the scene that were either taken by you or the photo lab.
Yes, it's a combination of my photos and the senior photographer's photos.
Not nearly 1,000, correct?
No.
Okay. Your Honor, they fairly and accurately represent the scene and the evidence that you collected or participated in collecting that day. Your Honor, the state moves to admit 109.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. There's one photo in there that's not taken by her or by the other CSI or Seattle Police Department. They may need to have argument on.
I already took that photograph, or that's still out, and I figured we could address it at the time in your notes. I apologize for not letting counsel know, which she has.
Then no objection.
All right, it's admitted.
I think the other things you talked about, the responsibilities for the CSI team were to map or sketch a scene. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell us how that works and what you do.
If it's an indoor scene, we will take measurements using a Hilti laser device or a regular tape measure. This was an indoor-outdoor scene. For outdoor scenes, we usually use our total station, which is an electronic optical instrument used in surveying. You probably see it out a lot with the tripods. And that machine has a telescope, and it can measure the horizontal distance, the vertical distance, and there's also an electronic distance meter that takes the slope distance. So it takes a picture of everything and maps it out, and we use a data collector to map that and later put that into Crime Zone, which is a CAD zone program, and make that a map that you will see.
I'm going to step back. You said a Hilti device, or what was the device?
A Hilti is just a brand. It's a laser device that we use.
Can you just spell it for the court reporter?
HILTI.
So it creates a diagram.
Yes.
It includes the evidence that you might have collected.
Correct.
Okay, and it accurately measures that. Is that
It
right?
does, very accurately.
And was that done in this case?
It was. Detective Don Ledbetter was assigned to map the scene.
And then you talked about evidence collection. What's the standard procedure for evidence collection? How does that work?
Once we photograph it and it's mapped into a scene, we will collect it, preserving it for later analysis. So we'll be wearing gloves, not to disrupt the DNA. We'll collect it and package it in the appropriate container so that it can be sent off to the lab.
You're the first person we've heard from that does that. So you
Okay.
wear gloves, then is there a standard procedure of how you document it, seal it, and preserve it as you indicated?
Yes. So, for example, a casing, a fired shell casing, we would collect that and package it into a paper sack or an envelope, and we would mark the outside of the sack or the envelope with what evidence item number that is, and then we will seal it with evidence packaging tape and put our initials on that. And then further, when we later put that into our evidence unit, we will make a tag that lists the date, the case number, the evidence item number, who's putting it into evidence, and that stays on the packaging.
And I presume it's in a secure location until it's needed again.
It is.
You mentioned sending it to the lab. What do you mean by that?
So our CSI unit, we collect evidence and we do some analysis. We can test whether or not something is blood or semen, things like that. But most of the analysis will go to our crime lab for DNA analysis and things like that.
And who makes that decision?
The case detectives, in this case, Detective Cooper.
Generally describe, so that's basically the role of the CSI, those primary responsibilities when you respond to a scene.
Yes.
When we say the scene in this case, I think you've referred to, on the street. Can you just kind of tell the jury what are the scenes or the areas that you processed?
Sure. So the first area that we processed is on the sidewalk, just outside of the front entrance to Otter Miller Hall. And next we went inside to, as you enter that building, it opens into a lounge study area, and we processed that area next. There's also a security office as you enter off to the left, and we processed some evidence that was located inside there. And one of the victims had been taken down a north hallway, just off to the northwest of the lounge area. So we processed that as a separate scene. And then the final scene I processed was the mechanical room, I believe it was, where one of the victims had run to after the shooting and was treated there.
Just for a moment.
States Exhibit 110 is marked.
fact, I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 110. Can you take a look at that diagram and let us know if that's the mapped out diagram depicting at least part of the scenes in this case
Yes,
and some of the evidence collected?
yes.
And that's 110, is that right?
Exhibit 110.
110. So I don't like the big board that was up. So while we're waiting for that one to come so that we can show the jury, I will move to admit 110. Objection.
Submitted?
But before we get to that, let me ask, on a scene, how do you determine what picks up, what is evidence in when you're processing a scene? Because you're right there at the beginning before this movie, you know everything.
Right. So normally when we respond to a scene, we're giving an initial synopsis or a briefing about what was known at the time. Always that will change, more information will be added, maybe some of the initial information wasn't right. So we will collect it, even if there's a known suspect, we're going to collect evidence, any sort of physical evidence that can prove the crime, whether or not we have someone in custody, whether or not we're told this isn't related. I'm still going to collect it just in case, because I can't go back out there later and get something I didn't take.
So even in a case like this where presumably you know there's a suspect in custody or video, you still collected everything you thought might have evidentiary value?
Yes.
So does that include things like random students' backpacks and belongings that were in the lobby?
Yes.
Or blood swabs and other things that might have potential DNA?
Yes, I collected those as well.
So that diagram in front of you, some of those evidence placards are for those kind of items as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So as we go through them, I'm going to have you label the ones we're going to admit, but those other ones are those kind of miscellaneous items. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start with some overall photos of the scene. You can keep that one in front of you, and I'm going to show the jury on the screen. Looking at is that 109 that you have up there? Is that right? Is it
Yes,
photograph
109.
Thank you. Looking at 109, photograph A. This kind of, is that Auto Miller Hall?
Yes, it is.
Is that the building and part of the scene that you searched that day?
Yeah, that's the south side of the building, and off to the right, you can see some of the crime scene tape that's been posted up.
And what are we looking at in photograph B?
This is 3rd Avenue West, looking northbound, and Auto Miller Hall is in the top left corner.
So still from that southbound, but now you're kind of looking down the street.
Yes.
And what about photograph C?
This was a photograph taken by photographer Tolson from the Photo Lab, and he was up on the roof of the Royal Brome Pavilion, which is across the street from Auto Miller Hall, and he's looking down onto 3rd Avenue West.
So this is from the rooftop now, getting the street from overhead.
Yes.
And D is just kind of panning a little bit, looking down again. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So that's still the south side of Auto Miller Hall.
Yes.
And E, what's that?
That's looking at onto 3rd Avenue West as well, and the east side of Auto Miller Hall. And next to the Auto Miller Hall is the sidewalk, which includes the scene that we processed outside.
So that's kind of like the front door is behind that tree there.
Yes.
And now looking at photograph F, shifting a little farther down the sidewalk.
Yeah, just continuing to the northeast corner of the building, and it shows the sidewalk and the street there.
And G, looking farther down.
Yeah, just continuing down that same street.
And the canal is over there, right at the edge of that photograph. Is that right?
Yes.
And that is on Miller Hall in H from above?
Yeah, that's the rooftop of Auto Miller Hall.
Now looking at photograph I, is that a closer up of the front entrance there?
Sorry, got behind.
Sorry.
Yes.
And J, a better view of that door.
Yes, that's the front door into the lobby of Auto Miller Hall.
You had mentioned one of the first things that you, or one of the things that you mentioned is collecting some items from the street. Is that correct?
Yes.
And generally, what were the items that you collected on the street?
I collected a fired shot shell, shotgun case, a shot wad, a beanie style hat that was on the sidewalk. There was a backpack off the curb on the sidewalk, and a Leatherman tool knife.
And this is mixed in with medical debris, is that right?
Yes, there was medical debris and signs of medical intervention and bloodstains and medical equipment all over the sidewalk.
And so in K, are we kind of looking at that scene?
We are.
So it's just a little farther from north from the entrance of Auto Miller Hall, is that correct?
Yes, just north.
And photograph L, I know that scene is not there anymore, but is that the perspective of where that scene would be?
Yes, this is after it had been cleared.
And photograph M, what are we looking at there?
So that is some of the medical equipment left there by the fire department and the security officer.
You know, the item in the foreground, on the lower right-hand side, do you know what that item is?
Yeah, that's a Starbucks cup.
And photograph N, is that looking at sort of that same scene from the Booking Now South?
It is, and that includes the evidence placards that I put down to mark each item before I collected it.
I'm going to just go through these. One, we can see that in photograph N, and now close-up of O. Tell us what we're looking at there.
Yeah, that's the shotgun wad.
And P?
That's the backpack that was just off the curb there on the sidewalk.
And that's number 2.
Yes.
And let me ask, what were 3 and 4?
3 was the knit beanie hat. It was heavily bloodstained. And number 4 was a Leatherman tool.
And those, particularly the beanie hat, was in a lot of blood, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have been packaged and marked biohazard, presumably.
Yes, I had to air dry that before putting it into evidence.
Then looking at 5 in photograph Q, what are we looking at there?
Number 5 is the fired shotgun shell.
And number R, is that the fired shotgun shell close-up?
Yep, that's the close-up photo.
I know you're not a firearms expert, but being an officer, can you just briefly describe what's the difference between the wadding that we're seeing and in number 1 and the shotgun shell that we're seeing in number 5?
Sure. So in number 5 here, you can see the shotgun shell, and on the right side of it, it kind of looks open and it has little crinkles on the top. And normally that's folded down, and inside the shotgun shell hole will contain the gunpowder at the base, and then inside will be the wad, and that will hold all of the. In this case, it was bird shot, so very tiny shot shells, and that wad will hold that, and then when it's fired, that will go down the barrel and open up, and then the shot shells will be released and be in a wider pattern.
So back when we're looking at 1, then that's actually what gets fired out of the gun and contains the bird pellets.
Yes.
And actually, go back to kind of this photograph N that shows all of the different evidence items you marked, and actually have you come note those on the diagram for the jury now that it's read.
States Exhibit 111.
Counsel, say the same
What number is that?
thing. This is 111, Your Honor, and it is, for the record, the identical to 110. I am going to ask the witness to draw on 111, so I'm asking that it be admitted for illustrative purposes. And 110 is actually admitted.
It's admitted.
And with the court's permission, Detective, can you actually step down and sort of write on 111 what each placard represents? There's pens right here.
You can take the photographs with you.
Oh, thank you.
There's one right up on the screen as well.
And while the detective is writing up, if you want to stand and stretch for a minute, or if you're going to testify again. And can you just actually jump back down? I'm sorry, I apologize. I was looking through the evidence. And just kind of point and read out loud in case they can't read it from there. Sure.
So number one, the north end of the sidewalk here was the shotgun wad. This is the backpack off of the curb. This is where the hat and the Leatherman tool were in the blood stains. The Leatherman tool was number 4, and then this is where the fired shotgun shell ended up.
And these are the correct distances then from the entrance and to the school. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's accurate. Okay. Thank you. You can have a seat. I guess you collected where you find it. Is that correct?
Correct.
You can't tell us whether it was kicked or moved in sort of the chaos that happened afterward. Is that right?
I can.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn to what you found inside the lobby of Auditor Hall. Looking at State's Exhibit 110, Photograph S, what are we looking at there?
That's the front door to the main lobby.
And T?
T is just looking inside that front lobby, and that equipment on the tripod in there is our total station that we use to map.
Okay, so that's the yellow triangular looking thing in there?
Yeah, that's
sorry,
our.
I just need to move this diagram back. photograph what are we looking at there?
This is just inside the second lobby doors, and off to the right is the staircase that goes up to the second floor inside Autumn Miller Hall.
Just if you turn to your right, this is what you would see.
Yes.
And there, is this like one of those photographs you described, taking it prior to sort of putting the placards down and collecting the evidence?
Yeah, this is before I've marked anything.
And B, what is it that we're looking at there for the record?
Again, just off to the right of those doors, on the floor, there's a bunch of unfired shotgun shells.
And W, what are we looking back at that doorway and that evidence on the floor there?
Yeah, looking back at the doorway, there's the sunken living room style area, and then off to the right of the doors is the door to the security office.
And then we're going back from the perspective of coming in, and in this photograph X, we can see evidence marker for 6 and for 7. Is that correct?
Yes, and 14.
And 14's on the table.
Yes.
14 is one of those backpacks we talked about?
Yes.
Okay. 6, what is, we're seeing here and why we're seeing a close-up of 6, is that correct?
Yes, 6 was off by itself, so I collected it separately, but it's an unfired shotgun shell.
And Z, is that closer up of 7?
Yes.
And what is 7?
7 was another fired shotgun shell.
Okay, so 6 was unfired and 7 was actually a fired shell, is that correct?
Yes.
And in BB, sorry, and just for the record, where the close-up of 7 is actually photograph double A. And now we're looking at BB. And what's the difference in this photograph now?
I've included the yellow evidence placards.
And it looks like we have in this photograph, at least that we can see, an 8, a 9, and a 10 and 11. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is 8 that we can see in photograph CC?
8 was I collected as a pair of eyeglasses, and the shotgun shells around it I collected as a whole with number 9.
And DD, is that for 9 there, is that right?
Yes, that's the remaining, the continuation of the unfired shotgun shells.
Well, tell us about 9. How many, I assume what I'm gathering is that you did not collect these each individually and package them individually.
No, these I collected as one group. I'd have to look at my report for the exact number.
So let's look at EE is closer up of 9, is that correct?
Yes.
And then in FF, what are we looking at there? And you can look at GG in your packet as well, if that helps.
So this is, once I collect all the evidence, I go back to our processing room and I'll take close-up photos using our macro lens and our copy stand. And so this is a post-it note that I took of the next photo that will be placard 9.
And now we're looking at GG. These are all those unfired shotgun shells you collected and packaged as 9?
Yes, they're just turned on their tops.
And how many were there?
46.
Looking at HH, and if I'm going back just to give the jury some perspective, looking at BB, 10 and 11 are sort of off onto the carpet, is that correct?
Yes.
And HH shows 10 and 11 close up, is that right?
It does.
And what is 10 there?
10 is another unfired, shotgun shell.
I don't know if you want to look at your report or do the math, but can you tell us how many total shells fired or otherwise you found at the scene?
50.
So that's 2 fired, is that correct? 1 out on the street and 1 right there. The number 5 on the street and number 7 inside, is that correct?
Yes.
And 48 unfired shells.
Correct.
And back to II, that also depicts 11 that we can see in HH, is that right?
It does.
And what is number 11?
Number 11 was a gut hook knife, and it was inside a black case.
And looking at JJ and KK, is that closer up of that knife once you're packaging it?
It is.
And so KK is a picture of that knife. And was it in a holster like that, is that correct?
It was, just like that.
And then what is LL?
I removed it to show the length of the blade and to test it for possible blood.
And you described it as a fish hook, is that right?
When I looked it up, it said a gut hook.
Gut hook,
Yeah, fishing
okay.
knife.
And what do you mean you tested it for blood?
There was some stains on the blade itself, and so I tested those with phenolphthalein, which is a presumptive chemical test that will show whether or not something may be blood, and it came back negative. It did not test for blood.
Was there other sort of spatter or red substance at the scene that you recall that ultimately was not blood? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So there was a very long blood, what we thought at first may be blood, spray across the tables just to the right inside the doorway, as well as on those eyeglasses that I recovered and on some clothing later. And they did not test positive for blood, and we later determined that they were, it was actually the contents of the pepper spray gun.
So it was red. And I
Yeah,
actually think
it was red.
You did find some actual blood.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Tell us where that perspective is.
This is from the second level of the Automilla Hall, looking down into that lobby.
And so we see number 6 at the bottom, 8, 9, all the shells, and then 10 and 11 sort of off to the left. And this is the perspective somebody would have had looking down into the lobby minus your equipment. Is that fair?
Yes.
And it's just a closer up of what somebody would have seen from above.
Yes.
And can you just tell the jury what perspective we're looking at here?
Sure. This is from the photograph it took from the staircase, if I remember correctly. And not sure if you can tell on there, but there is that red, those red drops that are across both of those tables.
Okay, so these are the red drops you're referring to that I'm pointing out on the picture on that table?
Yes.
And are those some of the drops, were those blood or were those pepper spray?
Those were from the pepper spray gun.
And in this photograph, can we see evidence item 12 as well?
We can.
And can you just kind of describe where that is for the record?
Yes, that's off behind that second chair on the left-hand side, and it's on the floor, on the tile floor there, and it's a red, ended up being our pepper spray gun.
Okay, so now we're looking at PP. It's just, so going back, you can see the number 12 in the far left of the corner by the planter, is that correct?
Yes,
And then that's a close-up PP.
correct.
And QQ, that's the pepper spray, and you collected that as well.
I did.
What are we looking at there?
That is a portion of the sunken living room lounge area of the lobby. There's a bunch of chairs and some little ottoman tables and some of the students' backpacks and stuff they had left behind.
And there's a placard 15 in that photograph?
There's placard 15, and that was another shotgun wad.
Okay. And so SS, we're looking at a close-up of 15.
Yes.
And that's the fired part of the gun, is that right?
Yeah, that's the part that came out of it held all the shells.
And so, Detective, why we have these pictures up, do you mind coming down and writing in red which of the ones we talked about? I guess we can start backwards. 15 is that fired shotgun wad. And going back to 12, the pepper spray. In 8 and 9. 7 was a fire ground. 6 was another unfired ground. And you can have a seat to touch on it. I'm actually going to show you some of that evidence. Actually, while I'm pulling this, my detective, do you have scissors up there?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to start with inside with item 6. If you can go ahead and, sorry, I'll start with you.
It's 112 marked.
To
114. 115. 116. 117. 118.
I'm going to start by handing you, counsel, did you, I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification, States Exhibit 113. If you could cut that open and take a look inside. And for the jury, that's the tape and the initials that you previously described to secure a piece of evidence.
Yeah, this is our evidence tape here and has my initials on it. These are the evidence labels that we put on them to submit, and this was a biohazard label just to let anyone know that's opening it.
Can you go ahead and open that and see if what's inside is what you remember putting in there?
Yeah, it's the fired shotgun shell.
And what, your placard numbers, are they the same as the evidence numbers on the package?
Yeah, it's listed as placard 7.
And so in evidence item 7 as well?
Yes.
And was that 112 or 111?
This is State Exhibit 113.
Thank you. Your Honor, the state moves to admit 113.
I'd like to see it after it's open.
Do you want gloves?
Maybe. Oh,
We'll have the detective pick it up.
yeah, thank you.
I can see just fine.
Thank you.
Any objection? Submit?
No, just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, if the court is willing, it might be more efficient if we take a brief recess. We can open these, counsel can inspect them, and so we're not carrying them back and forth. Is the court willing to do that for,
That's fine.
I apologize, Your Honor.
Great. All right, if you would leave your notebooks in the chairs, we'll take our break.